AFOP.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen. Gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized for questions.
So I'll get to some questions in a minute, but I think it's interesting that we heard Representative Washington. I'll go through and mention a couple of Democrat members who might have said defund the police and talked about that. I think what really matters is we are in Congress, and the question is, what has Congress done with regards to law enforcement? And what Congress has done is that during a Democratic-controlled House, Senate, and President, we increased funding for law enforcement. So where we have control, Democrats have stepped up and said, let's fund law enforcement, let's increase law enforcement. Let's give a couple examples. The Byrne Memorial State and local law enforcement assistance. We have control of that. We went from a $1.9 billion to $2.4 billion. That's what Democrats do when we have a choice. What do Republicans do? Let's look at the COPS program, which is so important in my district. Trump wanted to cut it for fiscal 19, eliminate it. He didn't succeed. So what did he do the next fiscal year? Oh, then let's try to cut it by 50%. He didn't succeed. Republicans over and over again bring bills like this, which say they're for law enforcement, but when it comes down, are you going to fund it? And I can tell you, my rural law enforcement members want police in the patrol cars. They want the equipment they need. They want the FBI to investigate those crimes that occur that they don't have the money for. And so when Republicans cut that funding, they are cutting the funding that helps my rural communities. When Republicans go after the FBI, they are hurting my tribal law enforcement because we rely on the FBI to investigate. So Republicans clearly have a problem with the FBI because they don't like the fact that it is investigating January 6th, whether you call it an insurrection, which is what it was, or a violent attack on the Capitol, which it also was. It's their job to investigate that and to prosecute it. Because they're mad at that, they are cutting the FBI. What do I tell my law enforcement in my rural areas when they can't rely on that FBI? What do I tell them when they can't utilize the COPS and the Byrne grants? Their political vendetta hurts my rural law enforcement. Their political vendetta hurts my tribal law enforcement. And the numbers are what counts. What did Republicans vote for? And the Republican Study Committee, once again, let's go after that law enforcement, federal funding for law enforcement that my local rural communities need. The Republican Study Committee wants to cut it. So Representative Nadler, Ranking Member Nadler.
You know, what you said is completely true, and we know about the Republican attempts to cut the FBI and even to eliminate the FBI because they're angry at the FBI's pursuit of the criminals involved in the insurrection, which I will call an insurrection. And we know about the fact that, as you pointed out, that when Democrats had control of the Congress in 2020, and of the Congress and the presidency in 2021 and 2022, in the 117th Congress, we increased funding for the police. And I just wanted to point out that perhaps as a result of that, crime is down in 2024 nationwide, including in major cities. I also point out that not one single one of the bills that we're talking about here invests in law enforcement or makes any community safer. But the investment in law enforcement that the Democratic Congress and the Democratic President made in the last 2 years has resulted in the 2024 nationwide crime statistics going down.
All right, so they actually do a lot of fear-mongering. They always talk about how horrible it is, but then they don't pony up and fund.
And I'll point out also, Mr. Reschenthaler pointed out a $30 million, I think he said, cut in policing in 1 year in Philadelphia. Even if it's true, maybe they had a better use for that money. Maybe they added $50 million or $80 million more a year later. You can't simply look and say that a given department in a city government was cut by a certain amount of money this year and say, therefore, the people in the city council and the mayor don't like that department. There may be a good reason for it. Maybe there was a deficit in Philadelphia in 2020, whatever the year is. I don't know. But you can't simply cite a statistic and say, that the city government decreased funding in one department in 1 year must mean that they don't like that department. That's absurd. There may be a dozen different reasons for it.
But more importantly, I mean, rather than sitting here second-guessing what other cities have done, and I am going to defer to our member from Philadelphia, rather than that, it's like, what are we in control of? What can we do? We are Congress, and our job is to fund federal law enforcement, and where we can, have federal law enforcement help our local law enforcement, like we do right now. Last week, there was a baby abducted, a mother killed in Clovis. Clovis is a very small town. It was the FBI that came in and participated in a collaborative process, and that baby is now found. It's that kind of collaboration that is very important, and when Republicans cut the federal law enforcement funding, my towns hurt. I don't know if you want to touch anything more on law enforcement, because I want to get to immigration.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that in the last Congress, Democrats passed the Protecting America's First Responders Act, the Public Safety Officer Support Act, the COPS Act, Confidentiality Opportunities for Peer Support Act, the COPS Counseling Act, and the Law Enforcement De-Escalation Training Act. By contrast, in this Congress, which is almost over, not one single law enforcement bill has passed. Instead, we have meaningless bills like the ones in front of us that do nothing except empty rhetoric.
So I think that that's key, and I think another thing we're doing here is a weekly installment. I'm going to start calling it the Trump's Border Chaos Strategy. Trump's Border Chaos Strategy. Because that's what they do, is they create chaos, they raise the issue of the border, but anytime it comes to let's actually fix it on a bipartisan basis, this problem needs to be fixed on a bipartisan basis, they kill it. They kill it. And we have, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the January 2024 political article, Trump vows to fight border deal, all the way.
Yeah, maybe we need a border czar. Without
Without
objection, so ordered.
Into the record. Mr. Chair, my request was to enter into the record.
Yeah, I said without objection, so ordered.
And I would also enter into a record Trump or a Senate border deal. It's not going to happen, and I'll fight it all the way, which was a Trump social post, January 17th and February 5th, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you so very much. So, Mr. Biggs, how's fentanyl most likely to come into the United States?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
How does fentanyl enter into the United States?
It comes mostly from the southern border, crossing the southern border.
It comes through the border crossing.
No, I didn't say border crossing. It crosses the border. You don't know what the pool is, because if any Democrats would have come to Arizona where we had the hearing just the other day, you would have heard testimony say very clearly, we don't know how much fentanyl gets in, we don't know what the total pool is. Where we have our resources, that is 90% of what's caught is where we have the resources. And where is that? The port of entry. Where don't we have resources? Between the port of entry. Why don't we have resources between the port of entry? Because we don't have any agents on the line anymore.
Well, I would point out that one of the reasons we don't have as much agents on the port of entry is because Republicans have also worked in the appropriations bill that we heard in rules, they actually proposed cutting funding. And Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the February 2024 article. Many Americans believe migrants bring fentanyl across the border. That's wrong and dangerous. As well as the Cato Institute report. You know, the Cato Institute, you guys, that's that nice Republican.
It's not a Republican, ma'am.
Well, conservative.
It's not a conservative group.
Fentanyl is smuggled
They're
for
an
U.S.
open borders
citizens.
libertarian
I'm
group.
sorry, it's my time. Fentanyl is smuggled for U.S. citizens by U.S. citizens, not asylum seekers, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
I am told that the judiciary Republicans are upset about the Cato Institute. You know, they're doing studies, and I think it's really important that that's what we're dealing with here, is we're not addressing the issues as they need to be addressed. We're not putting in more resources into the technology. And we're not doing what Americans want us to do, which is to solve this problem and not just to create chaos. And Republicans seem to be very good about creating chaos, chaos at the border, chaos on the House floor, and chaos wherever they go. Americans want us to make sure we have a pathway for dreamers, that we address the agricultural workers, and that we also secure the border. That's something that Democrats are determined and working to do, and we're looking for good Republican co-sponsors with us on that. I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to add, Ranking Member? If not, then I yield back.
Chair, thanks, the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, for questions.